We all have an intuition, a gut feeling. Are you listening to yours? Four of us, four different profilers. Our whole career was like a screeching halt, and we're not the only ones. When COVID came to town, so many people around planet Earth had to take a break, right? And had to redesign their lives. The four of us women, we had to do the same. We're all motivational and keynote speakers, and we do workshops, and we go into law enforcement and corporate America, and we train on our craft. And when everything came to a halt, Lena Cisco and Susan Ibitz came together and they said, we should do a show. We should do a show together. They reached out to me. I brought in Michelle Dresbold, and my name's Janine Driver. I'm the host of the show today. Thanks, ladies, for letting me host. And today's topic is going to be the DC snipers, in particular, Lee Boyd Malvo, up in parole in Virginia in about 2 years now. And this is a new change that just came about within the last year. So would you want a convicted serial killer living in your neck of the woods, your neighbor? We'll talk about Lee Boyd Malvo, one of the DC snipers, in a bit. But first, let me introduce you to the profilers. All right, up first, Susan Ibitz, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Ibitz. I'm a human behavior hacker. Some people hack computers. I hack humans. I'm specialized in trial prep. I work with lawyers, with politicians and lobbyists for one side, and hostile negotiators. And the other one, I work with managers and sales rep, training them how to behavior can be applied to everything. Actually, when people says how you can apply your craft, it's like where you cannot. From dating to legal, that's where I come up. Lena.
So I am a former Navy intel officer and a Marine Corps certified interrogator. I interrogated detainees down in Gitmo shortly after 9/11. I have been training law enforcement, government agency personnel, and military personnel since that time in interrogation techniques, interviewing techniques, body language, detecting deception, and elicitation. I also worked on a TV show for 3 years where I was an expert witness in catching lies. And I've published a couple books, gave a TED Talk, and now I'm doing this awesome show with 3 other fantastic women.
I'm so excited. And Michelle Dresbold, who's unable to join us right now, but will join us a little later in the show, had a conflict. Michelle Dresbold is the author of Sex, Lies, and Handwriting, and she is decoding your handwriting. And it's fascinating, and you'll be as riveted as I am, I'm sure, and our team. My name's Janine Driver. I'm your host for today. I'm the body language expert, hence you can see all the people's body language around me. I'm also a specialist in something called movement pattern analysis. We move in a pattern which can be analyzed. Last week's episode, we talked about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I kept screwing up the initials. I have a splash of dyslexia too. I know you have it, Susan, big time.
Yes.
I have a little bit. My son Angus has a whole bunch, and I kept saying RGB instead of RBG. My friend was in the other room. She passed me a note. She's like, you're saying your name wrong. So a big apology for that. And, we're human. That's what we say, right, Lena? It's like we're works in progress.
But you know what? Most high top profilers, there are dyslexic because your brain is wired differently and you can see things the other people don't see. I didn't know that until a couple years ago. So what it was told as a disability actually is a gift.
My son goes to a special school. Instead of calling it a learning disability, they call it a learning difference, which I like a lot better. All right, let's dive in, ladies. The DC snipers, in particular, Lee Boyd Malvo, up for parole. What does this mean for the United States? What does this mean for Malvo? What does this mean for the victims' families of the people that were killed? Anywhere from it depends on how much they owned up to. We're going to talk about those numbers in a bit, but it was way over what we thought in the DC area because it started before they hit the DC area. So let's dive in. What were you doing in October of 2002? Does anything stand out immediately for you? For me, I was living with a friend of mine, works for the FBI in Centerville, Virginia. We were within a couple miles of where 2 people were shot and killed by what later became known as the DC snipers. There were 10 people killed in the DC area, 3 critically wounded, all within a 3-week period. But this began before that in Tacoma, Washington. The first shooting took place on February 16, 2002. A 21-year-old cashier named Kenya Nicole Cook was shot when she answered the door at her aunt's house. Why? Because the aunt recommended that Mildred get a divorce. And Mildred is the ex-wife of one of the DC snipers. These are the people that were either killed or critically wounded by the DC snipers. The DC snipers, John Allen Muhammad on the left of your screen, and Lee Boyd Malvo. This terrorized the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. Literally, my roommate had two young sons. She was going through a divorce. I moved in to help, and we would take the little kids and they'd have to lay down in the back seat instead of being in their car seat. We got gas under a blue tarp. All the gas stations have blue tarps, and anywhere we looked for a white box truck with a white man driving it, we were panicked. Tonight, we're going to talk about, in particular, Lee Boyd Malvo. See, this white box truck was reported one time at the very first shooting, and then it started to get reported at all of the shootings. Yet the blue Chevy Caprice 1990 was also reported at one of the shootings. So this vehicle was on the radar, but not as much as the white box truck. And I remember literally about driving down the highway, and anytime I'd see a white box truck, I'd write the driver's license down. I worked for ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms at the time. I was in training. I was not involved with the DC sniper case. The snipers would lay in the back of this vehicle, this Chevy Capri, and shoot. One would sit in the front seat and say when to shoot, when things were clear, and the other would be in the trunk of the vehicle. This is young Lee Boyd Malvo. He was 17 at the time. He's now 34, now married. He is serving 6 life sentences in Maryland, 3 life sentences without parole in Virginia. But in 2017, they went to the U.S. Court of Appeals of the Fourth Circuit, and resentencing was ordered. And this began this whole, challenging of what was about to happen to Lee Boyd Malvo. However, something interesting happened just recently, February 2020. Virginia law has been passed that life sentences committed before the age of 18 can seek release after 20 years. That means Malvo is up for parole in just a couple years. Would you want him as your next door neighbor? No need to worry, because after he leaves Virginia, he's likely to go to Maryland, where he'll serve 6 life sentences in Maryland. He confessed, Malvo, in court to 17 murders total. Who knows, maybe there was even more. Let's dive in to Lee Boyd Malvo. What did we, as the profiler task force, see about his handwriting, his facial expressions, the word choices he used? Let's find out. Lee Boyd Malvo. Now he's married. If he gets out, what's next? First of all, he's not getting out. So ladies, let's dive in. What do you have to say? How about we go to you, Susan Ibitz, first? What did you notice about Malvo's face? I'm curious if from when he was first arrested at 17 to now, being 34, I'm curious if his face changed and what it says to you.
There are 3 things that I noticed on his face, and let's dive in and let's make a lecture on who was when he was 17 to now 34. Okay, guys, as my expertise is face reading profiling, let's talk about Malvo face and how it changed. I know most people get fascinated last week by ears, so we're going to go back to ears, eyebrows, and face. First of all, when he was 17, you can see that he have small ears. How we measure the ears? We start on the hairline and we finish on the chin. So in proportional, we can see that he have small ears. Another thing, where the eyes, you can see where the eye end, if you draw a line, the ears are high, meaning that he was listening with his eyes and he was processing information really fast. Some people says that he was the person who did most of the shooting, and he was doing a lot of video game before he started shooting real people because he was visual. So everything happened when he see it. The words he used, how he conduct himself has to do with images. Now, what struck me the most is how be so visual. He wasn't impact when he was shooting people. Another thing that it get me straight is you see how the ears are attached to the head. We saw in Ruth last week how her ears get detached from the head. But in this case, we can see how in the beginning, the ears were attached, but since he was in prison, the ears get more and more and more attached to the head. So meaning that he followed orders. I have the feeling for how the ears has to evolve, because ears has to do how we intake information. He tried to become this like perfect citizen that he follow the rules, but I don't know if it's screen smoke to get out, or he really start following the rules. Now, another thing that changed a lot for him is the pointy eyebrows. Can you see the 5 points on the eyebrows on the right? We can see he had pointy eyebrows in his personal life and his business life, meaning he was about knowledge. He wanted to be right based on data. Now, in the last 17 years, his eyebrows change. They're become rounded. When you have round eyebrows, meaning that you're about people, pets, and animals. So we went from a person about knowledge, from a person who is more connected to the exterior world and more connected with other people. I'm not saying that he is more humanized, but he definitely become more connected with what happened with other people, more connected with himself and talking about himself. Another thing who changed a lot was the chin. You see the small square chin, meaning that he was a straightforward, a shooter. We call it in face reading, when you have a straight chin, a shooter. When you talk, it's like you're shooting to someone. Now, his chin is round, meaning that when he talked to people, he's more human about the words he used. And the last one, you see the mouth, guys? The mouth was full lips and small. And now he still have the full lips, but have a bigger mouth, meaning that he's more talkative and talking to others. But something that I can tell you, he's not telling all the story. You see these lines on the border of the mouth, that meaning that he's keeping secrets in his personal life and in his business life, meaning there is a lot of story he's not telling us. He gonna tell us sometime? Who knows?
Susan Ibitz, that is fascinating. I could totally see immediately, as before you even spoke, I noticed the mouth for sure immediately, because the lips were still full, but they were initially, when he was 17, it was smaller. And then now he totally looks like a different person to me. I'm sure it looks like he gained a little weight and he's older, of course, now he's 34 in this other picture, but I found that fascinating about the lips. So what that part right here, so I don't think
it's like all of us have it, because all of us work being secret, like discretion is our like signature. So you see these little indentations here on the border of the mouth. That means that you're good keeping secrets. He wasn't keeping secret when he was 17, but now at the age of 34, you're going to see the indentations. They're really, really deep, meaning there are a lot of things that he's not talking. Another thing, he started having the baby face. Remember we talked last week, he have a more angular face. Now he's round. Has nothing to do with the weight, has to do with the shape of your face. Again, when I was skinnier, my face was more rounded. Now it's long. So his face become more like baby face, more likable. So I'm afraid that because he's more likable, my more baby face compared what he was 17 years old ago, people is going to start like feel more empathic with him. But it's a lot of secret, a lot of things that he's keeping behind. But yeah, you can see the changes. It's crazy how our face can reflect who we are and who we was.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm dying to find out what LENA Cisco has to say, and if it ties into what Susan just shared, whether it's about being secretive, whether it's about his transition to almost being more likable. I agree. As soon as I saw that new face, I was like, if I saw that guy sitting next to me on a bus, I would be like, he looks very friendly. I would never know that, he confessed to killing, 17 people, 18 years ago. So it's or 17 years ago. It's unbelievable. 18 years ago. LENA Cisco, what do you have, sister?
So funny, well, not so funny, but the secret lines and keeping secrets is exactly what I see in his statements. So let's take a look at them. All right, so we're going to look at 4 screenshots of statements that Lee Malvo said while in prison during an interview, and I'll read them along with you. So here's the first one. I mean, I was a monster. If you look up the definition, that's what a monster is. I was a ghoul. I was a thief. I stole people's lives and I did someone else's bidding just because they said so. I mean, that's the definition of a monster. So let's look at my analysis. And what I do on these slides is I highlighted some words and underlined some text so you can follow along with me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the bullet points at the bottom. We hear a lot of I's in this paragraph, okay? I was a monster, I was a ghoul, I was a thief. And now typically when I teach people about personal pronouns, I and my can be a really good indicator of a truthful person or someone who is telling the truth, because it tells me that that person is taking accountability and they're taking responsibility for what they're saying. A lot of times when liars are lying, they don't want to touch the lie and they don't want to take responsibility or accountability for the lie because it's bad. It makes them feel bad. And so we tend to hear a lack of I and my, and in its place, we hear we, you, they. But here we have all these I's. But the problem is it's very choppy speech. And so I have done tons of study. In 2015, I trained about 700 Customs and Border Patrol agents. And I started realizing that in one exercise we did, that when liars were lying, they started to shorten up their speech and use a lot of I's. So it's too many I's, right? So I was hearing it all the time. It's a convincing technique. But what also happens is that when we start to get nervous and we're not telling you the truth, our brain's cognition starts to shut down and we lose this ability to formulate compound sentences and everything starts to go short and choppy. And so when I hear an excessive amount of I's, to me, it discredits the validity of what you're saying. Okay, so that's number one. And then we have that repetition of speech, which you're going to see in the future slides as well. He is constantly repeating the definition of a monster. That tells me that this is something that he's anchoring to, right? So the repetition can show sensitivity. It can show affection, which people could try to impress you with something. It can also be an indicator that someone's trying to dismiss the topic, right? They're saying it, they're repeating it, and then they don't ever want to go back to it again. Or it could be because when people lie and they lose that ability to formulate compound sentences and to even just answer simple questions, they start to repeat words over and over and over again because they cannot think of what to say. And I think that's what's going on here. But again, I'm not a mind reader, but this is my analysis. And then we have some distancing language. So we know when he starts off, and I did someone else's bidding. Well, we know that the someone else is John Muhammad. So why doesn't Lee say this? He can't say John Muhammad's name in this entire statement, and that's a problem for me. Why would he want to distance himself from John Muhammad? But then he uses the word bidding, okay? He didn't do John Muhammad's bidding, okay? They were killing people. And so bidding is a way to soften up the harshness of an event. But he also worked with John Muhammad, and they were requesting, I think, $10 million from the United States government to create this utopian society. That is money. Bidding can have this connection to money. So is he using the word bidding because he's thinking of the money that they tried to get from the United States government in order to stop the killing? Again, I'm not a mind reader, but it is an odd word to use in reference to all the cold-blooded murders that he did. And again, he distanced himself when he says, just because they said so. Again, who's they? Well, we know it's John Muhammad, but why can't Lee Malvo say John Muhammad's name? Let's go on to the next slide. Again, I'll read this to you guys, follow along. We can never change what happened. There's nothing I can say, no apologies. There's nothing I can say except that don't allow me and my actions to continue to victimize you for the rest of your life. It may sound cold, but it isn't. It's the only sound thing I can offer. All right, let's see the analysis on this one. So I'm going to follow again along with my bullets at the bottom of the slide. You hear that repetition yet again. There's nothing I can say. There's nothing I can say. I'm sorry, there is actually. You could apologize. You could say why you did all those killings, but he doesn't. And the last time he says it, there's nothing I can say, oh, except, right? So already he's discrediting what he just told us, that there's nothing he can say. by saying, except there is one thing I can say, and this is what it is. Don't allow me and my actions to continue to victimize you. He takes accountability and responsibility for his actions right there. Now, at the beginning of this statement, though, we see the pronoun we. We can never change what happened. And I have a problem with this because who is we? He should be saying, I can never change what happened and taking that accountability. But we don't hear that. It's just like if you guys remember Anthony Weiner, before he came out and admitted to sending that tweet, in one of his interviews, he told the reporter, well, we're trying to figure out who sent the tweet. Who's where, Anthony? Right? It should have been, I'm trying to figure out who sent it. But he doesn't say that because he knows who did. He sent it. So if we go on, we see what I call the but syndrome. All right. It may sound cold, but lessens the impact of what's to come, and it weakens the certainty of a statement. So it may sound cold also tells me that that's exactly what's in his mind. People use words for a reason. He thinks and knows it's cold. This is why it comes out in his speech. If it wasn't a thought in his mind, we would hear something different, but we don't. So to me, that just says, you know what? It is a cold thing to say. Then he goes on his last statement. It's the only sound thing I can offer. Well, again, I'm not quite sure what the it is. What is he referring to? Right? His previous statement, we don't know. It's the only is minimizing language. Okay. So it just tells me that he's trying to say, you know what, let's just get this over with. It's not important. We're going to move on. And then finally, the sound thing that he can offer. What is the sound thing? We don't know exactly what he's offering. So in this statement, I hear a lot of distancing and I hear a lot of avoiding telling details and truth. So let's go on to the next statement. He gave me his time, his time. That's the only thing we possess. And where we invest it tells what we value. He gave me his time. He was consistent. Even though the consistency was madness, he was consistent. He gave me his time. Before we even get to the analysis, you guys are already picking up on the repetition. I know this, but let's go see the analysis. So here we go again. He's repeating two things, right? He gave me his time and he was consistent. First off, who is he? He never once says John Muhammad again. So we got a little distancing. Why won't Lee mention this guy's name? But he gave me his time. In the third sentence where he says, and where we invest it, it tells what we value. Well, first off, he's using we. And I'm sorry, you can't speak for me, Lee. You should be speaking for yourself. So I would expect to hear, and where I invest time tells me what I value. But right now he's speaking for all of us. So already that discredits his statement. But because he uses the word value, tells me that's exactly what he values. He wanted someone there to pay attention to him, to be that father figure. What Lee Malvo valued most over anything was time from another person, and John Muhammad gave it to him. So let's go on to the next statement. And it's very subtle. It wasn't violent at all. It was, I mean, it's like what a pimp does to a woman. Let's go see the analysis of that. And it's very subtle. It wasn't violent at all. What is it? He never comes out and tells us what it was. We're left to guess. We have no idea. But the really disturbing thing to me is that last sentence. I mean, it's like what a pimp does to a woman, because apparently in Lee's mind, how a pimp treats a woman is just fine. I have a big problem with that. Right. So all in all of these statements, he never once speaks ill of John Muhammad. In fact, he just tells us that he valued him. He repeatedly says that he gave him his time and that he was consistent in it. His sentences are very short. They're very choppy. I hear way too many I's. And that repetition tells me that he just can't use his cognitive brain to come up with good narrative statements, good details. Okay, liars say less. They just say less. And they also say, well, there's nothing I can say. And then finally, there's no emotion. I don't hear it. I don't see it. There's nothing. Now, he does reference himself as a monster, ghoul, and thief, but again, never tells us why. I don't hear any emotion. So I have some problems with his statements. Back over to you, Janine.
Lena, that was fascinating. I'm curious. I've always learned so much from you. I'm curious, when he uses the word monster, would you consider that minimizing language? And would you mind sharing with our viewer at home, what is minimizing language, and how does law enforcement use it as a tool? And then how do criminals use it to avoid, because instead of saying I'm a killer, he says a monster. Would you consider that minimizing language?
Okay, so no. So minimizing language is 2 words, just and only. And people will use it when they don't want you to hang out on a topic. So if I'm a killer and I don't want you to know, I'll say, oh, well, I just drove there around that neighborhood last night. Like I just drove, get off that topic, move on to something else because I know I'm guilty, right? It minimizes the effect, the impact, the information, because I want to get off that topic ASAP. But the monster thing is he's assigning himself this trait. But he doesn't come out and say, hey, I'm a killer. I was actually the one who killed all the people because I'm the one who slid through the back seat into the trunk and shot the people. Never says, I shot the people, I killed people. I'm just a monster. What's a monster?
A monster can be created. A killer is a killer. So he's using monster like, oh, they make me this way. It's not my fault. Look in my past to justify my story.
Yeah. Well, the problem I have is when I listen to people, you're going to tell me what you did and why you did it. I don't want to hear about I'm a ghoul, I'm a thief, I'm a monster. That means nothing to me. I killed 13 people. I shot someone in the head. That's what I want to hear because that's truthful information. But when you want to fluff it up, right, and assign it other things, when you cannot come out and tell me exactly what you did, I got a problem with that.
As a mother of 3 young sons between the age of 6 and 15, I find the word monster very childlike to use. And I wonder, I'm not a therapist, but or a psychologist. I wonder if, his growth almost stunted at a childhood level. I mean, he became the DC sniper when he was 17. At what point did he, I'm sure he's had other trauma as a young kid, right? I mean, he called Muhammad his father. And so I wonder if that monster, it was like the worst word possible back when that first trauma happened. And I'm curious if Michelle Dresbold will talk about what does his handwriting reveal, and does it say something about an immaturity or, being a lacking of development throughout his life? I'm curious. So let's turn it over to you, Michelle.
Hi. Well, let's look at these doodles. Now, which of these doodles, A or B, is from a teenage serial killer? Susan, do you have any opinion on this?
I think the letter A, the first one.
Why?
Because it's way more specific. It's look like supremacy. The second one, to me looked like a person who just tried to be scary. But I think I will say A, but you're the expert.
Okay, well, this is actually a trick question because both A and what A is a man with a bulletproof vest ready to go into battle and his fist is out ready to punch. That's A. What B is, it says fear the nobodies, sort of a double meaning, with a figure with its hands up with blood on the hands. And the truth is both of these are doodles by teenage serial killers. Now, a lot of times people will say, I had no idea this kid was disturbed or this kid was going off and then he came into school with a gun. There are always signs. If you're a teacher, if you're a parent, if you're a social worker, look at their doodles, look at their actions, look at their handwriting. Now, the first one is by Boyd Malvo, who was part of the DC Snipers. And the second one, Fear the Nobodies, was by Dylan Harris, who was one of the Columbine killers. When you see a teenager, especially a boy, and he starts doodling crosses, skulls, Nazi signs, it's a sign of what's going on in their mind, and take it seriously. So you are half right, Susan. Number 1 is a teenage serial killer, but so is number 2. Why don't we look at some more writing of Lee Boyd Malvo. Now, this is his signature from around the time, actually, this is when he's in his 30s. He was, the doodles were when he was 17. Now he's in his 30s. And you'll notice his name, and when his name is all crossed out. It's X'd out. What does it mean when you X yourself out? It means I shouldn't exist. When you see Xing in handwriting, especially in a signature, it means the person is either thinking of death, whether it's their own or somebody else's, but it means they shouldn't exist. If you have employees and all of a sudden somebody's signature they start to exit out, put them on suicide watch. Talk to them. What's going on in your life? The other thing you'll notice in this writing is that if you look at the word sincerely, part of it is darker, part of it is lighter. That's somebody who's, I'm calm, I'm angry. I'm calm, I'm angry. You don't want to see handwriting that has inconsistent pressure, because what is that pressure? It's what's going on in their brain. I'm trying to stay calm, but I'm still angry. I'm trying to stay calm, but I'm still angry. Why don't we look at the third slide? Now, this is from Lee Malvo not very long ago, also in his 30s. It's a love letter to somebody. Actually, and what's interesting is in prison, so many serial killers get women loving them, marrying them. They get more proposals than most men ever get. Don't ask me why. But if you ask me, is he ready? Would I want to marry this guy? Absolutely not. Look at the word you, Y-O-U, but right before that quote, happy face. It's also darker. And the Y is gone over. That's anger, that's aggression, that's internal tension. So we see writing again that's sort of light, then heavy, then light, then heavy. So we have somebody who tries to control himself, but he can't. It's what's going on in his brain. If you look at that happy face, it's really not very happy. It's actually an angry face. So despite everything, even if the handwriting looks fairly neat, fairly calm, it's not. You look at pressure. Does it ever go heavy to light? Now, I was thinking that one time what we need to do is we need to actually look at the profile of some of these women who write to these serial killers, because I cannot understand them. It's not my thing, but I would love to get a series of women's handwriting who actually fall in love with people who are serial killers. It doesn't matter if they're Ted Bundy, doesn't matter if they're the DC sniper or Charles Manson. They have women all over the place. So I think that should be one of our profiles. What do you think, Susan?
I would love to try to understand how they fall in love with someone who is first in jail, second, who killed someone, in this case, a serial killer.
Right, in many cases. So anyhow, those are some handwriting samples of Lee Boyd Malvo, both from 17 until his 30s. He's now 38. But you see, he still does have some anger issues. And I would be very, very careful about being around him. So that's a wrap, unless you have any other questions.
Oh, Michelle, that was incredible. That I love the handwriting analysis, because at the end of the day, we can see handwriting without people knowing we're analyzing them. You know, we can see a card that our child's girlfriend writes to them, and we can take a sneak peek, even if we don't even know what they look like. I love that you can give us so much information, Michelle, on the strokes and the angle. And I can't wait to when we have an episode, we'll have to have a comeback episode talking about the case and those cards that they left. You know, they left those tarot cards at the scene of the crime. And I know you talk about that quite a bit, so I can't wait. We'll have to do a bonus segment, ladies. All right, now it's my turn. My name's JANINE Driver. You are with the Profiler Task Force, theprofilertaskforce.com. If you're watching us on Facebook or on YouTube, we're so excited you're here. If you are listening on our podcast, theprofilertaskforce.com, we invite you to go check out our channel over on YouTube, or join us over on our Patreon page. We'll tell you a little bit more later, where you can help create the content. You become part of our community. We'd love for you to check that out. You can find out more information at theprofilertaskforce.com. Again, my name's JANINE Driver. I'm the body language expert. So let's look at Boyd Malvo's body language. You might be thinking this is an interesting picture to talk about body language with the DC sniper, Boyd Malvo, and I agree. Before we dive in, we're going to obviously today talk about lips. That's why I have lips here. I have a quiz for you at home. What color lipstick will make you more money if you're a waitress? What color lipstick will make you more money if you're a waitress? Lena, what do you think? What color?
Pink.
You think pink. Susan Ibitz, if you had to guess, what color do you think?
Red. Hello.
You think red. Well, we'll find out at our end of our lip segment. I'm particularly going to talk about Boyd Malvo's lips. But first, let's talk about the power of lips. You know, there's no sweat glands in lips, and they are 100 times more sensitive than your fingertips. And this is, and to me, very interesting because our lips are revealing more than we think. So 100 times more sensitive than your fingertips because there are millions of nerve endings in our lips. This is why babies and toddlers explore new things with the lips. They bring them up to the mouth. And if you think about the color of the lips, I think sometimes we think our lips are, are pink naturally or red naturally. Well, it's actually the blood veins that you're seeing in them. The lips themselves are actually opaque. So you're seeing the blood underneath the lips. And lips are just like a regular fingerprint, like a thumbprint. Every lip mark is unique. So if you have a magnifying glass and you have a cocktail party and you see someone put their glass of wine down and someone else put their glass of wine down and there's two lipstick marks, you could figure it out if you had a magnifying glass, whose cup belonged to who. Lips, you lose your plumpness over the years. And I'm sure Susan Ibitz could talk to you about this with face reading because collagen decreases with age. And as you may know already, when you kiss, that biological transfer is happening in the back part of our brain and it affects how we choose our partner. So before we go into what was Boyd Malvo doing with his lips, the answer to the quiz is there was a study done in France, and lo and behold, red lipstick, red, you will get rich with red lipstick if you're a waitress. It increases your tips from men. And not only that, men find women with red lipstick more attractive. Subconsciously, it's because it connects to our vagina per a man subconsciously. So this is a study done in the sex capital of planet Earth over in France. Je m'appelle Janine, comment ça va? Now let's dive in with Boyd Malvo and check out what was going on in his lips. We certainly didn't see him with lipstick, and we didn't see him, pouting or doing something that might be alluring. Instead, we saw something with Boyd Malvo that instead of increasing us wanting to give him a tip or giving more attention, his lips say to us, wait a minute, there's a lip lock here. I like to say when we don't like what we see or hear, our lips disappear. So here we don't see his lips disappear just yet in this photo, but we do see the corners of his mouth coming down. And if you notice the corners of the mouth coming down, a little bit of a dimpling in his chin, this, as you might imagine, is surprise. I mean, it's not surprise, it's sadness. It's sadness. So right here is where the lips disappear, When we don't like what we see or hear, our lips disappear. As a matter of fact, they even go more dramatic in different pictures with Boyd Malvo. So I want to talk about what does it mean when our lips disappear, when they roll in. And I always say the best way to learn something, to analyze it, to profile it, is to do it yourself. So everyone pull your lips in. If you're watching at home or if you're listening on our podcast, again, this is the Profiler Task Force. My name's Janine Driver, and we're here with Susan Ibitz, your face reader, Lena Cisco, who is our interrogator and statement analysis expert, and Michelle Dresbold, your handwriting analysis expert. So pull your lips in and imagine saying, I'm so happy to be here. And pull your lips in. I think you'll begin to feel what it feels like. It's suppressing speech. It can indicate such things as disapproval or a troubled mind. Let's watch Chris Watts here, who killed his pregnant wife, Shanann, and his two young daughters, Celeste and Bella. We see a tongue protrusion, which is something we'll talk about in a future episode. What I want you to focus on here is look how his lips totally are pulled 100% in. He's also doing something eye blocking, which we'll talk about in our future episode. When we don't like what we see or hear, our lips disappear. Now, it can mean you're thinking, right? And usually if you're thinking, it means you're uncertain about something. It can literally contain or stifle your emotions. You're holding it back, or you have that deep concentration, that internal turmoil. It's often connected with negative thought. You know, there's a great expression, you know, she had a stiff upper lip. It's that suppressed speech, right? You didn't lose your cool. If someone is doing this to you in a meeting, or if you're on a date and you say, I'd love to get together sometime, and their lips disappear, understand it's likely there's disapproval about something. Maybe they still want to get together with you. It's just with this whole coronavirus, they don't know if it's a good idea to keep meeting all the time. It can indicate as well a troubled mind. And if you look at some of the people that I pulled here for you, you may remember this dude, right? He was over in, you know, in New York and cheated on his wife with hooker. I think she was like hooker number 9. And so Elliot Spitzer is his name. His lips completely take over here. This is that parasympathetic nervous system just shutting everything down. We see O.J. Simpson doing this with a splash of sadness. And this guy right here, I don't know if you remember him. Do you guys remember him, Lena or Susan? Do you remember who this is? Blagojevich? Yeah. What do you remember Blagojevich did? What do you remember, Lena? Do you remember what he tried to do?
Gosh.
There's so many corruption, I cannot remember all of them.
So
Sorry.
he tried to sell Obama's seat, right? So he tried to sell Obama's seat. He denied that he was trying to do it. As a matter of fact, he was in a great interview. We don't have time to go over today, but maybe we'll put it in bonus content for the people who follow us on our Patreon page, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Because what happens, this interview that he does with David Letterman is fascinating. He said, I've been dying to get on your show for in the worst way. And Letterman says, well, you're here in the worst way. And Letterman said, every show you went on, you constantly professed that you were innocent and telling the truth. And the more shows you went on, the more I said to myself, you know what? This guy, he's guilty. So we see his lips disappear. Here is, you may remember, Jussie Smollett. He staged a hate crime over in Chicago. And then we have Lance Armstrong. I brought both pictures of Lance Armstrong here. One is with those lips imploding. They are pulling in that suppressed speech. And the other one is with this facial blocking, hiding the lips, very similar to this move. And again, we'll go over this in our future segment. The interesting part, I brought Jimmy Fallon with us because I think when we talk here at the Profiler Task Force, here on our show, I think oftentimes people think we're just talking about criminals, but yet in our first episode last week, we talked about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and what did she say? In our celebrity segment we do once a month. Guess what? All of the things that we're talking about, you do them, your kids do them, your significant other does them, your boss does them. It's not just an entertaining show. We want you to walk away protecting you, your family, your friends, and your finances, because we all have an intuition. And our job is to put some data points on your intuition so you can better understand people. When Jimmy Fallon did his lips disappear here, I want you to pay attention. What is making his lips disappear? Is he cheating on his wife? Is he stealing? Is he a murderer? Is he No, it's none of that. But yet his lips disappear in a casual conversation with Vince Vaughn. Why? Anxiety, stressed, thinking, uncertainty about something, negative thought indicator, that stiff upper lip, right? It's suppressing speech, disapproval, a troubled mind. What is happening when Jimmy Fallon's lips disappear? Let's see if you can spot it.
And Vince Vaughn, I'm so happy to see you.
Good to see you, man.
Thank you so much.
The shows have been great. You've done a great job on this quarantine Zoom show.
I appreciate that, buddy. Thank you. We're trying. We got a lot of good people behind us helping us out. Where are you quarantining?
I'm at
So do you see it? He did it a couple times. So he says, where are you quarantining? Jimmy Fallon, by the way, I met him. We should put a picture. I'll have to send to you, Susan, edit and put the picture of me and Jimmy Fallon back in the day. So I met Jimmy Fallon in Vegas years ago. So right here, the lips are disappearing when he's talking about the quarantine. So we see a very dramatic one. How is this any different than what we see with Chris Watts or what we see with Boyd Malvo? It is not different. As a matter of fact, if you're in a meeting and you're not happy with what someone is saying or someone is talking too long, if you sit there and pull your lips in, people subconsciously will pick up on it that there's something you're not happy about. They'll stop talking faster. They'll maybe sweeten the pot. You're going to negotiate for a car and they're not budging. Pull your lips in. I promise you, you're more likely to get a discount when those lips disappear. So yes, do they happen subconsciously? Of course. Can you use it as a tool to let people know you're not happy and you can get what you want? Absolutely. So let's go right at the beginning and one last time.
Vince Vaughn, I'm so happy to see you.
Good to see you, man.
Thank you
the
so much.
shows have been great. You've done a great job on this quarantine Zoom show.
right? Quarantine Zoom show. Plus we see that tongue protrusion. Again, we'll go into more details on that in a future segment. So here's Jimmy Fallon. What does this mean for you at home? This means this is a move that we all make when we are, you know, suppressing our speech, when there's negative thinking that's happening. As I wrap up the show, I want to first say I met John Allen Muhammad's ex-wife. I met her at backstage in a television show I did for Anderson Cooper. And it was very disappointing what she shared with me. See, the DC snipers were killing everybody so randomly. So when they killed her and he kidnapped their 3 kids together, it would look like she was a random victim. And I asked her, how are your kids doing? And through tears, she shared with me something I'll never forget. She said when they busted the DC snipers, her kids were being bullied at school, where people said to her 3 kids, if only your mother never left Washington State, the West Coast, if only your father killed your mother over there on the West Coast, all these people over here in the East Coast would be alive today if they just killed your mother. And so she had to change their last name, move to a different school, and it was devastating for 3 young children to hear such hate in the world. By the way, the DC sniper shooting is unlikely to ever be duplicated again. This was prior to 9/11. And if you think about it today, even gas stations, there's cameras everywhere. So post 9/11, the world changed. It's unlikely if something like this were ever to go down that it would last the 3 weeks that it lasted here in the DC area. All right, ladies, any questions about what I shared on, you know, when we don't like what we see or hear, our lips disappear? I think there's some interesting connections, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because I talk about secret lines. I talk about the shape and the size of the lips and the mouth, and just happened that all the thing intertwined, how face reading, MPA, statement analysis, handwriting, everything come together. That's one of the things that I love the most about our show is how we can show all the facet of behavior and how it is related. And I love when you says pressing the lips, because I caught myself sometime in some Zoom meetings when I'm talking with a client, like, that is not going to work. And it's true. It's not that you're lying. It's when you withholding because you cannot say what you want to say sometimes.
Yeah, it's a suppressed speech, right? It's that suppressed speech and that like stiff upper lip. I'm going to not say anything here. You know, when we don't like what we see or hear, our lips disappear. What about you, Lena? Any questions about that?
Oh, definitely. Well, no questions, but during my interviews, when people are very uncomfortable talking, I'll hear what we just saw in the statements that I read, and then it'll be followed by no lips.
Yeah, it's funny. Now, my kids do that, and I know they're up to no good. You know, I'm like, what are you guys up to? They're like, nothing.
Nothing.
And I'm like, okay, I look around, you know, what's missing? Is there a problem? And, you know, food missing, danger, something broke. All right. This has been our second episode of the Profiler Task Force. Again, the profilertaskforce.com. If you're listening onto our podcast, be sure to also check us out, follow us, so you can get an alert every Wednesday night when we post a new episode. If you're following us on Facebook or on YouTube, again, be sure to click the bell or whatever it is to follow us and get an alert. Every Wednesday night, our time now is 5 p.m. East Coast time. And then we do a happy hour on that same Wednesday at 9 p.m. East Coast time. That's live with a special guest. And this week's special guest is James Kavanaugh. So he prefers to be called Jim Kavanaugh. He's a retired ATF SAC, special agent in charge out of Nashville. A very interesting guy, fabulous, well-respected, not only within ATF, but within the FBI and law enforcement world. He was instrumental in the DC sniper case. He's going to share with us, how did he get ahead, you know, instead of just following the snipers? How did he get a couple steps ahead? What did that journey look like? And what did they learn from that case that changed them in law enforcement today? And how can that help us as entrepreneurs, as business people, as moms, as dads, be better versions of ourselves? So we believe we all have an intuition, and we believe it's up to us to listen to it. And our job as the Profiler Task Force is to give you those little tools to put actual meaning behind what your gut is telling your brain to protect you, your family, your friends, and your finances. A big special shout out if you're not already a Patreon member. Patreon is just this really cool site that supports artists so we can continue to bring this show to you. It allows you to be a producer of our show, helping us share our content and giving us some ideas of what we can do next. If you are a Patreon member, there's different levels. One of the levels allows you to be part of this VIP cocktail hour that we have every Wednesday night and live with our guests. So we want to thank our first two members, Lauren Smith, for joining our Patreon family, and Chrissy Bingham. We're so happy. Thanks for being part of our community and our team. Check it out. We'd love for you to join us too. We will see you on Wednesday. My name is Janine Driver. I've been your host tonight. Susan Ibitz, Lena Cisco, and Michelle Dresbold. We'll see you next Wednesday. Well, we'll see you this Wednesday.
Bye, guys. See you later.
Bye.
See you next Wednesday.